the Jews are the Indigenous people of that region. And what does this mean for Canada? Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepinak, she is the newly elected chief of the Assembly of First Nations, and upon her election, she said to Canada and Canadians, we need your support. You have to work with First Nations people in a good way. We are here in a good way. At the same time, there's a point where if you don't listen to our people, you don't listen to our chiefs, you don't answer them, then there's problems. And so to Canada, we are coming for you. When individuals are in trouble in the Indigenous community, the easy, common scapegoat is Indian residential schools and the claim of mass graves. There are graves, and there are mass graves, and there are children who did die at Indian residential schools, not in the numbers that we're told. There wasn't a genocide. This is the scapegoat that serves the purposes of people who are deeply suffering the loss of many loved ones. And I blame the media for that because the media has driven the phantom genocide mass psychosis, and they have not been good reporters. And now they continue to drive the claims of genocide against Israel in a very similar way. So I see these things as connected, and I believe that UNDRIP is probably the element behind the strange resistance to cracking down on all of these street campaigns that are now pro-Hamas. They can't be called pro-Palestinian anymore.
Hello and welcome to tonight's show, where we provide information and resources for everyday Canadians. We're so thankful you can join us. Our guest speaker this evening is Michelle Stirling, and the title of tonight's show is Land Grabs, Connecting UNDRIP and Palestine. It's September 17th, 2025, and this is the Empower Hour. If you're joining us for the very first time, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Tanya Gaw, the founder and leader of Action for Canada. Tanya has a powerful focus on faith, family, and freedom, and she and the Action for Canada team are always hard at work, bringing awareness to the many critical issues facing our nation. Tonight, I'd like to give a great big thank you and much love to Tanya and the team that stands behind her for all the hard work they do. Hello, Tanya.
Hi, Heather, and thank you for that. Boy, this is going to be a fantastic show tonight. I am so looking forward to having Michelle Stirling on. She always gives such incredible presentations, and it is on a topic that I would consider, I bet you nearly 100% of Canadians aren't thinking about and don't understand the threat that's associated between and the connection between UNDRIP and Palestine and the push for a Palestinian state. But first, before we get to Michelle, I would like to just make a special statement. The assassination of Charlie Kirk has struck a heavy blow to believers and non-believers alike around the world. A beloved brother in Christ, husband, father, and warrior has fallen. Yet, as our Lord said, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Charlie's death will not silence the truth. Rather, it has ignited it, amplified it, and is carrying it forward. Charlie, the founder and president of Turning Point USA, lived with a singular compass, Jesus Christ and His Word. He laid down his life daily for his family, for his country, and for the kingdom of God. He showed us what courage looks like, what sacrifice demands, and what it means to be a man of integrity. The result of his tragic passing is not the end, but the dawn of a new era. The stronghold of evil is breaking, and light is overcoming the darkness. The baton has been passed to run with endurance the race that has been set before us. But especially to the men, the bar has been set. Rise up. Be the husbands, fathers and protectors that God has called you to be. Lead with courage, stand for truth. Now is the time to defend faith, family, and freedom. Let us honor Charlie not only by attending memorials, but by carrying forward the mission he began to stand unashamed for Christ, to lead lives of integrity, and to call this generation back to God. Charlie has received his crown and heard the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Now it is our turn to continue carrying the banner. What the enemy meant for harm, God will use for his glory. Let us rise, unashamed, unafraid, and unstoppable. I want to encourage all of our members and our viewers right now to join an Action for Canada chapter or volunteer to be a leader and become actively involved in your community. Also know who you're voting for in upcoming elections at all levels of government and where they stand on critical issues. Together we can win this battle. God bless you, and God bless Canada. Heather, would you now please introduce our guest?
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you for that beautiful tribute to Charlie Kirk. It's such a pleasure to welcome return guest Michelle Stirling to tonight's show. Michelle is a career counselor, author, researcher, columnist, blogger, filmmaker, and television producer. Tonight, she's joining us to expose the psychological manipulation driving UNDRIP and BC's illegal DRIPA. And she'll reveal how Canadians are unwittingly surrendering their rights, freedoms, and property under the false banners of colonialism, genocide, stolen land, and white supremacy. If you haven't had the opportunity to watch Michelle's documentary video, The Bitter Roots of Sugarcane, we recommend you do so. Will you all please help me welcome Michelle Stirling. Hello, Michelle. Welcome back to the Empower Hour.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you, Heather.
Glad to be back.
Oh, welcome, my friend. I am just so looking forward to your PowerPoint tonight and the information that you're going to share with our members and our viewers. And as I said, a moment ago, I really do not believe that there's too many Canadians who are thinking about the connection that you're going to be making tonight. I think it's critical. I think it's relevant. We have a lot of mass migration going on in Canada right now from countries who mean us harm. And that's part of the army of the left, I think I could put it that way, to destroy our democracy and our sovereignty. And so you're going to put a piece to this puzzle that isn't easily connected, but once this light bulb comes on, we're going to have a good conversation at the end, at the close of your PowerPoint, because I'm going to open it up for our viewers to, if you're not on Zoom and you're watching us live on social media, please sign on to the Zoom, because we're going to open it up to some Q&A. And it's really important to know, what can Canadians do about this? What actions can they take? Because we have to shut this down. This isn't a matter of that we're just going to allow this to happen and Klaus Schwab's evil words come to fruition, that you'll own nothing and be happy, because I'm not happy about what's going on. I'm not giving up my land without a fight, and we got to stop it before this goes any further. So yeah, just welcome to the show, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Now, the topic tonight is land grabs, connecting UNDRIP and Palestine. And as Tanya said, a lot of people have not made this connection, and they probably haven't even thought about it. Maybe people have not seen this kind of logo out there, land back from Turtle Island to Palestine. What does that mean? Well, we have to be on our toes these days, because there was actually a hostage taking in Canada just a few days ago in Montreal. You might not think of it as a hostage taking, but it was. A bike lock was used to lock protesters and clients and police in at the Indigo store. And as John Fraser points out, this is an act of terrorism. So, people could get hurt if there was a sudden stampede to leave. Let's say somebody let off a flare in there or something. could have been critical. And here are the police inside, standing by as the protesters mobbed the store. So you have to wonder what's going on. Oh, Canada, what is going on? Why are the police not intervening? And what is Turtle Island? Well, it is a creation story, just as all of us, all faiths, all peoples have various creation stories. This one was popularized by beat poet Gary Snyder in the 1970s. Snyder, of course, is German, Scottish, Irish, and English ancestry, nothing to do with Native people. But the myth is, generally speaking, that Sky Woman fell from the sky. The birds carried her up so that she had a soft landing on the back of the turtle, and the turtle lifted up everyone. Some stories say that a muskrat was sent down to bring up earth. The muskrat died on the way up, but the earth arrived and magically the land was formed. So if you read about it, you'll see there are, themes very similar to Noah's Ark and Garden of Eden, all intertwined. So that's the concept of Turtle Island. There's also many people I've heard in discussion saying that Native people knew that North America looked like the back of a turtle before there were satellites. Take that as you will. So this is from Snyder's Turtle Island poetry collection, which is available on a PDF online if you want to read it. Turtle Island, the old new name for the continent. The USA and its states and counties are arbitrary and inaccurate impositions on what is really here. So by this time, here's Gary Snyder, an American citizen, already claiming that America was illegitimate. And he's asking people, hark again to these roots to see our ancient solidarity, and then to the work of being together on Turtle Island. But strange geopolitics have come to Canada, and why? Is it related to UNDRIP? I think it is. So here we have a tweet about Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand says, recognizing a Palestinian state is the priority, and Canada is reevaluating ties with Israel. Canada rewards jihadists while punishing the only democracy in the Middle East. And he says Canada is Islamist occupied. And you may want to have a look at Tom Quiggin's online book, which you can download, The Muslim Brotherhood in North America and Canada, which he writes, sabotaging the miserable house through the process of settlement and civilization jihad. Dr. Ellie David posted this. This is the border between Egypt and Gaza. 7 layers of walls, fences, and razor wire to make sure not a single Palestinian refugee could flee to Egypt. Why so much hate for the Palestinians? What do the Egyptians know about them? Actually, Gaza used to be part of Egypt, but Egypt didn't want it back in the Sinai Peace Treaty. They gave it to Israel. So most of the people in Gaza are ethnic Egyptians. But they have been radicalized by the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. So in Canada, we are now dealing with a crossover of Indigenous and Palestinian issues, which is larger than most people know. And you can see the Mohawk Warriors flag along with Palestinian flag. If you go online and you just Google from Turtle Island to Palestine, you'll see there are dozens and dozens of articles and images. So what is UNDRIP doing connected to this? Well, UNDRIP faced pushback in Canada. It wasn't easily adopted. So back in December of 2020, 6 provinces were objecting to UNDRIP. They didn't know what did consent mean. Is this a retroactive act? What does free and prior informed consent mean? How will this affect land rights? There were lots of questions. Even by April, there was still pushback, now also from First Nations groups. And again, you see here the Mohawk warrior flags. Remember Oka? Maybe some people don't remember, but there was an armed conflict in Canada between the Mohawk Nation at Oka and the Canadian military back in the 1990s over a golf course and land that was said to be sacred burial ground. But suddenly, May 27th, 2021, all of the pushback against UNDRIP went away when this catastrophic claim was made. And on that day, Canada went from being an internationally recognized peacemaker to a global pariah. And that happened pretty much overnight. So what's going on? Well, it looks like it's ideological subversion. And this is Yuri Bezmenov. He was a KGB agent who sought asylum in the West. And this is a very interesting interview. There's a longer interview with him, but this is good enough. You'll get the gist, and I've put the gist here. So to change the perception of reality to such an extent that despite an abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their communities, and their country. So the first step is demoralization. 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation, pumping Marxist-Leninism into the heads of students, and of course, challenging the basic values of the country or patriotism. We saw all of the statues of Sir John A. Macdonald coming down, Queen Victoria, churches being burned and vandalized. And the thing is, once demoralized, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who is demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell him nothing. And you probably have encountered this if you've challenged, people that you don't know that well about the claim of the mass graves at Kamloops. A lot of people get really upset right away. And even if you say, well, look, there's not even a list of names of children who are supposedly missing, people will just be infuriated. They won't even be able to speak with you. Some people even get really aggressive. So, they are demoralized. They're unable to see reality. And then there's destabilization, 2 to 5 years. Well, we're quite far down that path. Crisis, 6 weeks, and then a violent change of government and normalization of whatever travesty is the outcome. And recall also that Canada had been divided and economically decimated by the 30-year tar sands campaign prior to the mass graves mass psychosis. So climate action ENGOs had adopted Indigenous causes and vice versa. So now I'm going to refer to a piece that I wrote on my Substack, but I want you to know that I think our theme going forward has to be that we are sorry no more. Because if you feel guilty, you will be guilted into giving up your rights. If you feel sorry for things that you didn't do, but you think that someone else did, like the phantom genocide that is promoted in Canada related to truth and reconciliation, if you feel guilty about that, then you will give up your rights and you won't be willing to fight for them. So how are events in the Middle East connected to Canada? Well, I'd like to just walk through this a bit. Macron's conflicts of interest preclude recognition of a Palestinian state. And what would it mean for Canada's sovereignty? You can read this on my Substack in full. But the point here is that on October 11th, 2023, Macron, the president of France, and Total Energies made two 27-year contracts with Qatar for LNG. So first of all, that makes him a climate hypocrite, but it also, compromises him. It's a conflict of interest. And Drew Godefridi, who is a Belgian jurist and author, he's written a number of articles about how Qatar has totally compromised France. And this is what the gist of the matter is for us. From Turtle Island to Palestine is a land-back movement. This petition was published on October the 26th, 2023. This is just like 19 days after October 7th. And what is the claim? From Turtle Island to Palestine, colonization is a crime. So a huge majority of Indigenous people side with the Palestinians, even though the Israelis are actually the Indigenous people. The Jews are the Indigenous people of that region. And what does this mean for Canada? Well, on December, this is Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak. She is the newly elected chief of the Assembly of First Nations. And upon her election, she said to Canada and Canadians, we need your support. You have to work with First Nations people in a good way. We are here in a good way. At the same time, there's a point where if you don't listen to our people, you don't listen to our chiefs, you don't answer them, then there's problems. And so to Canada, we are coming for you. That sounds like a threat. And on December the 7th, the day she was elected, this resolution was passed by the Assembly of First Nations. It was moved by Wilton Littlechild, who was one of the commissioners of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And note Article 26(1) here, that Indigenous peoples have the right to the lands, territories, and resources which they have traditionally owned, occupied, or otherwise used or acquired. And see, this is call for a permanent ceasefire in Israel-Gaza crisis. What is Canada's Assembly of First Nations doing, dabbling in international geopolitics and diplomacy? Well, it seems that Palestine and Turtle Island's liberation are entwined. So this is by Mohammed Abdu for Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is Qatari funded. And he's writing here that there are demands for Indigenous land rematriation, land back, to end Palestinian occupation. The bewitched American-Canadian false dream must fall and be replaced by a genuinely decolonial, enchanting else. So he's calling for the destruction of Canada and the United States. Now you might say, oh, well, that's just like one guy. Well, that's what the whole movement is about. Now, why would an AFN resolution or UNDRIP be relevant to the federal government? Like, why is Anita Anand siding with the Palestinian state rather than with the development or recognition of a Palestinian state, rather than denouncing Hamas and siding with Israel? Well, perhaps because this is Canada's action plan to implement UNDRIP. And to implement UNDRIP, these are the principles within that document. I'll let you look at this later by yourselves, because I just don't want to go too long. But did you know that Canadian federal laws must align with UNDRIP? So this is from that action plan. Indigenous peoples exercise, this is the goal, the priority area. Indigenous peoples exercise and have full enjoyment of their rights to self-determination and self-government, including developing, maintaining, implementing their own jurisdiction, laws, governing bodies, institutions, political, economic, and social structures, and colonial laws, policies, and practices that have interfered with Indigenous peoples' self-government are repealed or amended. And if I did just a quick AI Google, it says, yes, Canadian federal law must align with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. All of our laws are being rewritten. So maybe that's why the police are doing nothing. I don't know that, but maybe that's why. And yet, as Tanya pointed out when she first looked at the presentation, she said, you know, Section 52(1) of the Constitution of Canada is the supreme law of Canada, and any law that's inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution is, to the extent of the inconsistency, of no force or effect. But going back to the resolution, and this is an article that I wrote back in 2024 about this resolution and about this curious thing with Chief Woodhouse-Nepenack. She was trying to get on an Air Canada Dash 8 plane, and the Dash 8 has a very small overhead cargo bin. And her famous headdress, which has a very special hat box to go with it, wouldn't fit. So they wanted to put it in the cargo and in the cargo bay. And she made a big stink about it. This is a sacred item. How can you do this? But ironically, you have to think that the resolution that was passed unanimously by the AFN with only 2 abstentions actually aligns the First Nations of Canada with a terrorist entity, Hamas and the Palestinians, who invented airplane hijacking. So perhaps the resolution was intended as an act of kindness. Of course, the war in Gaza is horrific. It's a war. And it's tragic to see the many people who are injured or killed. It's something that we see much more of on screen, curiously, than we see anything in the Ukraine. A very similar brutal conflict is going on between Russia and Ukraine. We have almost no news coverage of it whatsoever. And the things that you would see there would be, I would say, equally horrific. But we see lots of what's going on in Gaza, and it's terrible. But was this an act of compassion? It's framed as an extension of UNDRIP, and whether it was intended this way or not, the resolution means that 635 First Nations, whose chiefs represent some 1.8 million Indigenous people in Canada, now profess to be aligned with terrorist groups that have made bloody history dozens of times through terrorist acts, suicide bombings, aviation hijackings, or bombings. And settler colonialism is the theme running through the resolution. If you're not Indigenous, that means you. So the Israel-Gaza crisis is directly connected with settler colonialism, contributing to violence, assimilation, and dispossession. Canada must not be complicit in supporting settler colonialism, both in Turtle Island and around the world. So now they've elevated themselves to some kind of global entity. And there's no mention or condemnation of Hamas terror attack of October 7th against Israeli citizens. Citizens, not combatants. And they call for an end to the violent, illegal occupation of all Indigenous peoples' lands. So look what you're funding. You're funding this. So according to the AFN's financial statements, their revenues totaled $52 million. Government funds totaled $48 million, or 91.7% of total revenues. So your tax dollars are being used by an organization that is sympathetically aligning itself with a terrorist group defined as such by the Canadian government. And on that same list are a number of other Palestinian terror groups. And this whole thing only seems to have been covered by Jeremy Apple in his The Orchard Substack. I never saw anything about it in mainstream media. And Hamas is a listed terror group. You can find that at the Public Safety Canada site. So the declaration of a Palestinian state, Drew Godofridi, who I mentioned earlier, he sees this as an act of diplomatic terrorism, that France is recognizing an imaginary Palestinian state. Under international law, particularly Article 1 of the 1933 Montevideo Convention, the criteria for statehood is permanent population, a defined territory, an effective government, and the capacity to engage in relations with other states. So in a way, through the AFN, they are establishing themselves as an organization that engages with other states, and yet neither of the two Palestinian political entities, that would be the West Bank, where Mahmoud Abbas is the leader, or Gaza, where Hamas is the leader, is the elected government. Neither of those political entities meet these criteria. and neither do any of the First Nations in Canada. But I suspect that their goal is the recognition of a Palestinian state to uplift their claims as First Nations with independent governance, as we've seen prior, in alignment with UNDRIP. So the land back movement is based on a claim of genocide and reparations, and of course also climate change. You can read more about that in this. Now, something very curious, that in Canada, there was a genocide conference in 2014 in Winnipeg, and it seems that this is where the real genocide idea in Canada came from, because they went out of their way to advertise on websites, listservers, Facebook, etc., that were frequented by local Indigenous people. And this same group also denounced Israel as being guilty of genocide. So I wonder if Canada was a test case to see if mass media, mass psychosis would easily pass via social media. And this author, Andrew Wilford, said, "I'm often troubled by our tendency to obediently accept the force of law without questioning its often arbitrary and contingent foundations." He's supposed to be a criminologist. You know, the idea of rule of law is fundamental to Canada, peace, order, and good government, right? So if you are saying, well, the law, you know, especially the law on genocide, like maybe it's too sticky, you know, we don't think it's, we should actually stand by those principles. Anyway, if we look to what's happening with Israel, the same group, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, claimed Israel is committing genocide. And that claim, just like the phantom genocide in Canada, got worldwide media coverage. And yet, this is a very good article. Don't trust this group. Why? It has no membership requirements, just $30 you can join and call yourself a genocide scholar. Iraq, a country that produces negligible amount of genocide scholarship, was inexplicably overrepresented on the membership list, 80 individuals hailing from the country. Then after this was made public, the organization was mocked on social media because the roster included Adolf Hitler and Emperor Palpatine. And there they are. And I guess they took their site down for a while after that. But in Canada, we have this reversal of foreign policy with no parliamentary debate. You know, Prime Minister Carney just decided himself, it seems, perhaps with cabinet, that he was going to recognize a Palestinian state. And just a few months prior, when Parliament was in session, such a motion had been declined, rejected by the majority of the House. So, and why did he say Muslim values are Canadian values? So anyhow, I wanted to also mention the French state conflicts of interest preclude authority to recognize the Palestinian state because Jordan and Egypt used to have in their possession, Jordan had the West Bank and Egypt had Gaza. Between 1948 and 1967, either of them could have declared a Palestinian state there had they wanted to. So why is the West supposedly trying to establish a Palestinian state when this is really a regional issue? Well, here's part of it. History upside down. James Pugh has a great blog or Substack called Woke Watch, and he writes about David Mayer-Levy, who wrote this book, and asked this question: how did unacceptable anti-Semitism morph into justifiable anti-Zionism and odious Jew hatred turn into a politically correct Israel hatred? Now, this book was written some time ago, but he goes on to explain that Yasser Arafat, who was then the leader of the PLO and the Palestinian people, he was enamored with how during the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong had mobilized left-wing sympathizers in Europe and the United States. and activated campuses. Yeah, just like we saw. And the struggle for human rights. Isn't this how UNDRIP frames everything? So he got this advice, Arafat got this advice, stop talking about annihilating Israel, turn your terror war into a struggle for human rights, then you'll have the American people eating out of your hand. And yet, as Drew Godofridi wrote to me, Hamas leaders have stated it themselves with chilling clarity that we must teach Israel a lesson. We'll do it again and again. The Al-Aqsa flood of October 7th was only the first time. There will be a second, a third, a fourth. When asked if this means total annihilation of Israel, the answer was immediate. Yes, of course. So Hamas has a publicly stated platform to annihilate Israel. That's genocide. And yet, Israel is the one being accused of genocide. And why? Because in 1972, the Kremlin co-opted the Islamic world to destroy the West. According to a 2014 paper, which you can read online free of charge, the Kremlin decided to turn the whole Islamic world against Israel, and they wanted to instill Nazi-style hatred for Jews throughout the Islamic world and turn this weapon of the emotions into a terrorist bloodbath against Israel and its main supporters, the United States. And no one within the American Zionist sphere of influence should any longer feel safe. So, chillingly, that is where we stand today.
In times of financial uncertainty, securing your wealth is more important than ever. With inflation, market instability, and economic challenges, many Canadians are turning to one timeless strategy: precious metals. Gold and silver have historically retained their value, offering a hedge against economic turmoil and a safeguard for your assets. If you're looking to invest, there's good news for members of Action for Canada. We're proud to announce our partnership with Steve Merrill of Sun City Silver. Steve is not only a friend of the Freedom Movement, but he's also offering Action for Canada members exclusive access to some of the best pricing in Canada. Thanks to his extensive client base and affiliation with Silver Gold Bull, you can now secure your precious metals at incredible rates. Silver Gold Bull is a trusted Canadian leader with live pricing available 24/7 and nearly 400,000 five-star reviews on Trustpilot. When you purchase through Steve, you're not only investing in your future, you're also supporting the Freedom Movement, as a percentage of each sale helps support Action for Canada. Plus, there's a bonus. If you place an order of $5,000 or more, you'll receive a 1-ounce pure silver bullet, a unique and valuable addition to your collection. And if you refer someone who places a $5,000 order, you'll get another silver bullet as a thank you. To get started, visit actionforcanada.com/purchasing-precious-metals/. Remember, your decisions are your own, and we recommend doing your own research before making any investment. But with Steve Merrill's guidance and our partnership, you'll be on the right path to securing your future. Secure your assets, protect your future, support the movement. Visit us today to learn more.
Now, the UN is an unelected body, and so we should consider Canadian law on treason. Land back from Palestine to Turtle Island? Well, if President Macron, now beholding to Qatar on so many fronts, actually does recognize a Palestinian state, and if Prime Minister Mark Carney does so, what will the reaction be here in Canada from the ardent Turtle Island land back activists? Will they try to use the UN 1960 Resolution 1514 15 Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples, along with UNDRIP nationally and DRIPA in BC, to declare their own territorial sovereignty? I don't know, but I think they might. So this is the resolution, granting of independence to colonial countries and people. I'm not going to read all of it. I'll just read these key points. Recognizing that the peoples of the world ardently desire the end of colonialism in all its manifestations, convinced that continued existence of colonialism prevents development of international economic cooperation, affirming that people may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources without prejudice or any obligations, and is based on the principle of mutual benefit and international law, not Canadian sovereign law, and welcoming the emergence in recent years of a large number of dependent territories into freedom and independence, and freedom for those which have not yet acquired independence. And part of this then says, immediate steps shall be taken in trust and non-self-governing territories or all other territories which have not yet attained independence to transfer all powers to the people of those territories without any conditions or reservations in accordance with their freely expressed will and desire. Where can this go? If we're aligning all of our laws with UNDRIP, and if they choose to activate this UN 1960s resolution, where might this go? And if there's pushback, what might happen? Well, Native people could shut down Canada. They did it in 2020. Maybe that was a test run. If you remember, in 2020, they shut down Canada for, I don't know, I think about 6 weeks, and almost brought the economy to its knees. And again, you can see here that this is all connected with these ENGOs and promoted by 350 Canada. So what's happened is this has now become, the Gaza conflict has become a global terrorist movement. I mean, why in the last stage of La Vuelta, one of the world's top cycling races, did this anti-Israel mob storm a bike race just because there was an Israeli team? Well, if we go back to what I said about history upside down, it's that movement has gone global. So in addition to funding the AFN, Canadian taxpayers are also funding Gazans, and most of that money ends up in the hands of Hamas. So Roman Baber does a good job of holding the feet to the fire, and you should support him where you can. Where has our peace, order, and good government gone? UNDRIP has destroyed all three and opened the door to chaos and terror. And this is from the Constitution Act, that the Senate and House of Commons make laws for peace, order, and good government of Canada. We have those laws in place. They're not being enforced. And is it because UNDRIP is now taking precedence over Canadian law? That's my question. And again, my statement is we must be sorry no more. Now, I just want to also mention that I do empathize deeply with the sense of loss that the Indigenous community has. I believe they are suffering deeply from ambiguous losses. I just saw an article today that in Alberta alone, the Indigenous community has a drop in life expectancy of 7 years over that of non-Indigenous people. 7-year drop in life expectancy. That's mostly due to the opioid crisis. But imagine the burden of grief on that community. And so when people are in trouble, they always look for a scapegoat. So when the world's in trouble, the scapegoat is the Jews, and now Israel. When individuals are in trouble in the Indigenous community, the easy, common scapegoat is Indian residential schools and the claim of mass graves. There are graves, and there are mass graves, and there are children who did die at Indian residential schools, not in the numbers that we're told. There wasn't a genocide. But this is the scapegoat that serves the purposes of people who are deeply suffering the loss of many loved ones. And I blame the media for that because the media has driven the phantom genocide mass psychosis, and they have not been good reporters. And now they continue to drive the claims of genocide against Israel in a very similar way. So I see these things as connected, and I believe that UNDRIP is probably the element behind the strange resistance to cracking down on all of these street campaigns that are now pro-Hamas. They can't be called pro-Palestinian anymore. They're definitely pro-Hamas. Anyway, that is my presentation. You can download these from my blog. These are both on my blog. You can read my Substack or my Medium page. There's lots of stuff related to this. And I thank you for listening.
Well, thank you, Michelle. That was spectacular. And you've done an incredible job of connecting the dots. It is extremely concerning to know that you had mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood's explanatory memorandum, where they've made it very clear on their attack against the West, right, to enter our miserable house from within and to take over. So all of these Muslims are getting into positions of government so that they can push their foreign policies and implement here Sharia law and other things that are very concerning. They are hold the seats, a third of the seats at the United Nations. So they have a huge impact at the United Nations. The other 2/3 is pretty much communists, and they call it the Red-Green Alliance. And so the jihadis, the Muslims, and the communists or Marxists are all working together, using each other as, I guess, useful idiots until they don't need, one another anymore and to see. So they're coming after all the European and Western Christian nations. And as you say, we don't deny that there was suffering amongst the Indians, but it is a part of life. And on the show, I've done the comparisons before to my mom coming through the war, having her house completely bombed. It was tragic. War is tragic. But the difference is that when the Europeans came in, they came in peacefully. They were making treaties into a land and a country where there was over 640 tribes that were all infighting. They'd never create a nation. They weren't first. They're not First Nations. They're not Indigenous. According to the Indian Act, they're Indian. And, we need to stop using the other side's language and put a perspective in all of this. You've been on the show as well before, and you have done such an amazing job and you've shown the receipts and the evidence of the schools that it was very comparable, the deaths to the Canadian youth as well, because of illness and diseases, because of their parents going trapping, and these children had become orphans. There's so much more to this story, but putting all that aside, if we can victimize a certain group and then make that mass psychosis, that psychological warfare effective by calling all of us these evil white colonizers, it just perpetuates this problem indefinitely. And it's come to a time where I know my generation has never done any harm to the Indians. My parents didn't do any harm to the Indians. And so in order for them to thrive, in order for everyone to thrive and be treated equally in Canada, I 100% agree with you. This needs to stop. It needs to come to an end now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, I do want to point out that despite the fact that there is an infiltration, according to Tom, and if you go on his social media, you can find a link to this and download it. Mm-hmm. In Israel, there are 2 million Muslims who live in peace and are in all different levels of government. They're doctors, nurses, lawyers, accountants, generals in the army, ambassadors. So, none of this is to say that every Muslim is jihadi, because that's simply not true. And I think many Muslims who originally came to the West were trying to leave the kind of oppressive, very traditional kind of Islamic rule, theocratic rule. And they came looking for a freer life. You know, and it's very difficult. See, if you're a Muslim, if you leave the faith, they'll kill you. So, you know, it's not like Christianity. Some people leave the faith. They, some denominations, you know, term you a heretic, or they excommunicate you, or can no longer participate in certain rituals, but they don't kill you. And, you know, if you're a Jew and you become a secular Jew, you're still considered to be a Jew. And of course, the Orthodox community would prefer that you would come back and, you know, be more observant, but they're not going to kill you. You know, it's just, so that's a big difference. And so that's why there are very few Muslim apostates. There's one fellow named Dan Bermawi, and he has a book coming out just around the time of the anniversary of October 7th. And he was a Muslim, converted to Christianity. He lives in the States. There's also Mossab. Let me just get his book and show that to me.
Okay, well, while Michelle is finding the book, it's...
I found it.
Oh, you got it? Okay.
Yeah, I knew exactly where it was. Sorry, I should have had it on my desk.
That's okay.
Anyway, From Hamas to America. Okay, so he was the son of a Hamas leader. And he converted to Christianity ultimately, and he's one of the main spokespeople against Hamas and against what Hamas is doing to the Palestinian people, because they are using them as human shields. They are preventing Palestinians from evacuating areas that are under conflict, and they don't care, you know. And if they think somebody is a collaborator with Israel, I mean, even if there's no proof, because they don't put anybody through a trial or anything, if they think that you're a collaborator, they horribly torture their own people, you know, tie them up and whip them with electrical cables, tie them up and break their legs with iron bars. Terrible, horrible
And murder
things.
them. Well, you know, it's interesting, Michelle, because we're having quite a shift around the world and recognizing that Islam actually isn't a religion. They've been coming under the guise of religion so that they could infiltrate the West, but it is a political military system, and that it's all encompassing to every single part of your life. And everywhere that the so-called moderate Muslim goes, the radicals follow, and they have the money, the power, and the will to destroy and to seek and destroy, and they destroy everything in their path. And they want world dominance, and so they have become a global threat. And if you talk to people that specialize in Islam and the teachings of it, they will tell you that the majority of their Quran and Hadith and other teachings are about the non-believer and how to destroy us, how to kill us, how not only the Jews, they're coming after the Christians and any other non-believer. So there's really quite a shift that when we talk about, you know, the moderate Muslim, there is no such thing as a moderate Muslim. There's a disobedient Muslim that isn't either has. I met a fella, he actually did some work here for me. I've known him for years, but I didn't know that he was Muslim because he says, I'm not a practicing Muslim. So we started talking about faith, and I started explaining Christianity. And this was like 2 weeks ago, and he actually gave his life to the Lord. And he is just like, you know, I've been questioning things, and I've been interested in reading the Bible. And once I could say, you know, look at the man Muhammad and see the life that he led. It was death and destruction, rape, pillaging, just murder, everything that it is founded on. And I says, then look at who Christians follow. Look at Jesus. And I says, compare the two, and you know that everything about Islam came 600 years after Jesus Christ. Muhammad came 600 years after Jesus Christ, and they basically took from the word of God and have deceived billions of people. And so this is really quite it's very disturbing to see now and understand the emphasis by the United Nations on being so aggressive in getting so-called Palestine, it's not a state, it's land that is within Israel. Isn't it interesting that the United Nations, a third Sharia compliant, have absolutely no objective that the countries that the Muslims came in and stole from Christians, there is no say about them being colonizers and coming in, raping and pillaging and taking all of those lands. It is only Western Christian nations are the target. And it's very concerning to see how the natives, the Indians in Canada are being used as pawns because they feel like they're going to get something out of it, but they're not.
They think they're going to get land back. They think that this is their ticket to establish a precedent for their own claims for land back. And you know, and the twisted analogy, if you like, for both the Palestinian state establishment and say First Nations who want to establish their own states or get land back is this idea that Israel was established because of the genocide, the Holocaust, and that's simply not true. But that's the analogy that's being played out and that works emotionally on the general public. And of course, you know, the public want to see the pain and suffering stop. Of course, everybody wants to see that stop, except Hamas. They love it.
Well, and the majority of the Palestinians as well. I mean, a poll was done from within their own community right after October 7th, 2023, and the majority of Palestinians themselves celebrate it. And still to this day, look at what's going on in our streets. I
would say, you know, there used to be a huge number of Palestinians, both from the West Bank and Gaza, who worked in Israel. And they made more money in a day than most people in Egypt make in a month. So this is the socioeconomic disparity in the area. So these are people who are deemed to be refugees, who are getting refugee payments from the West, sometimes in the order of, I think, $300 a month, which there is a lot of money. And if you are in an Egyptian working, you maybe make, I don't know, like $120 a month, $200 a month. And this is what a Palestinian could make in Israel in a day, doing trades or, you know, and so Israel, I think before 67, there were something like 300,000 Palestinians who worked in Israel, and many of them worked in sort of high trust positions. Most of them worked in construction, but there were some who worked in restauranteering, and some stayed overnight in Israel. It was forbidden, but they did, you know, and then they go back home on the weekend. Israelis used to travel into the West Bank and go shopping at their little shouks and looking for the best hummus. So it wasn't a perfect relationship, but it was nothing like what the violence has turned into now. And it's because of the radicalization, as I mentioned, the Kremlin plan to radicalize the Islamic world against Israel and destroy the West ultimately. So I would say that there are people who, if they were not living under the thumb of Hamas, probably would say, you know what, I'd prefer to be able to work in Israel and make money and come home and have a real life here. Like if you look at Gaza before the war, it looked pretty good. But, you know, there's one example I can give you from 2013, I think it is. You can probably find it on YouTube. In Gaza, a group of entrepreneurs decided, why don't we make something fun for the kids? They made a thing called Crazy Water Park, kind of like West Edmonton Mall's big water park, right? A beautiful kind of resort place, fun. Hamas burnt it down. So, you know, if you are living in Gaza and you don't support Hamas, they'll kill you. And the same in the Palestinian territories. There's a story of Ikhlas Kuli, who was a Palestinian woman in the West Bank. They claimed that she had collaborated with Israel. She was the mother of a widow with 7 children. So they took her 17-year-old son and they whipped him mercilessly with electrical cable, black and blue, until he admitted that his mother was a collaborator, even though she was not. And I was in touch with Khaled Abu Twame, who was a Palestinian journalist there, and I asked him, was she a collaborator? And he knew through some contacts. He said, no, there's no evidence that she ever was. So they killed her. They whipped her 17-year-old son to black and blue.
Yeah.
Till he confessed. And then they killed her, leaving all these children with no one. So it's the people are living under tyrannical rulers. And that's not to say that I'm sure that there are many Palestinians who do hate Israel. And as you said, there was that poll. But I think we also have to take into account there are people who would like to have a normal life, but they can't, and they can't speak out against who's in charge because they'll just torture them or kill them.
Yeah, the problem is they've been so indoctrinated as well from early on through the school systems.
That's exactly
through all of the UN education.
Mossad's story.
We've heard it time and again. So I think Islam needs to be eradicated from the West. You got 56 Islamic majority countries. Go fill your boots there. Violence follows them everywhere they go. The Quran and Hadiths are filled with annihilating the unbelievers, and we got to take that seriously. And it's no coincidence that this is not a religion of peace. That is a mockery of all kinds of peace. And I think that we have had enough through the Muslim Brotherhood's explanatory memorandum. They've said what their plan is to infiltrate, get into positions of government without firing a shot, take over. They're pushing Sharia law in Canada at all levels. Alberta is a hotbed for it, actually, and we're addressing that. And of course, there's a lot of money coming in from Qatar and other places that is funding this because their objective is world dominance. Now, with the Indians as well, this is highly funded. You can imagine from George Soros and others who have an invested interest in getting a hold of our natural resources and controlling including our water. Right now, the land grabs are anywhere where there is a water resources, whether it's by the ocean, ports, rivers, lakes, and so we've got to take it very seriously. So, a couple of questions before we end. What would you say Canadians should be looking for in their own communities with the regarding the land grabs? Where should they be going to city council meetings? Because that's where I see a lot of this is happening. Should they be discussing it with their MLAs? There are these secret deals that are going on. BC particularly is a template for the rest of the country. We're finding these land grabs are happening with chiefs in secret meetings. Money is passing hands. It is really scary. I just met with an Indian band member in the UBC, University of British Columbia area, and there is a massive land grab going on behind the scenes, and there are big developers that are involved in it as well. These developers are tied to China. I mean, the circle of corruption here is about money. And you mentioned treason. I do believe that there's a lot of people that are facilitating foreigners, such as China being wrapped into the development, the UNDRIP, the Muslims. It is concerning. So what would you recommend?
Well, first of all, inform yourself. And secondly, I think that it has to be dealt with at a national level. I think that MPs have to be involved. And, with respect to BC, unfortunately, there were no treaties made in BC as there were in most of the rest of the country. So, as I understand it, there's something like 235 bands in BC claiming 135% of the land, like they all have overlapping claims. And the critical issue was the recent decision, Cowichan, I think it was, where now personal property rights are in question. And until that's resolved one way or the other, then a lot of economic issues in British Columbia will get stalled out because nobody wants to put their money into a province where it's not sure that whatever thing you build or do may not have any legal standing because somebody shows up and says, hi, we're doing this.
businesses don't want to even, get started in British Columbia because of this as well. There was a lot of businesses that were on the property in Richmond-Annacis Island area that were part of that deal. It is illegal. Judge Giesbrecht has written an amazing article recently on what's going on in Manitoba, because it's happening in every province. And there are documents that need to be seen, but he was particularly in the article talking about how they're closing down parks and saying, this is Crown land.
Right.
It is 100% illegal, he said, to shut down land. And he has said for his own property that he's worked hard for, he says, nobody's coming to illegally take my land. And I think all Canadians need to embrace this. You don't need to be victimized in this. You, as Michelle said, you need to get educated, and you need to start doing freedom of informations. This other member of this band, he is doing them in regards to what's going on even in Vancouver. And it's amazing what you will come up with. And we're going to need this. I mean, this is a 911, my Canadian friends, that you really need to get involved. Don't rely on Action for Canada. Don't rely on Michelle to be the only ones that are on the front line. Every single community should have an Action for Canada chapter in it. You should all be going to every single city council meeting. You should be going in groups to your MLAs and MPPs, and you should be meeting with your MPs and demanding a restoration of our laws. Constitution section 52(1) says, if any, abbreviated, any law in legislation is in violation of our Constitution, it's of no force or effect. I'm going to send out a special email. I'm asking anybody that hasn't joined Action for Canada and getting our emails, I'm going to ask you, please go on to Action for Canada and do that, because this has been a 3-week series. We had David Lindsay on, and he taught us about 100% what our land rights are, going back to our Constitution and other founding documents, such as the Coronation Oath. They don't have a right to do this, zero right. And we need to move forward with court actions. Action for Canada is working on that, so please financially support us as well. And then we had Dallas Brody on last week, an MLA in BC, who is standing in Parliament and fighting this. Now, can you imagine if there was 7 dozen more MLAs that were standing in Parliament who understood that these treaties need to be torn up and this needs to be rescinded? That's what we need to focus on going into elections. There's Alberta elections going on right now. Do you know where your elected officials, who you're going to vote for, stands on this issue? This is critical. This is a 911 call. And so, Michelle, is there anything else that you would recommend for people as far as actions are concerned, or any advice that you would give them as we wrap up the show?
Well, again, I think, reading this book and this document.
Okay.
And reading also the book that I referenced earlier, History Upside Down. It's a very short book, and it was written some time ago, but it's like he's prescient. He can see what's going to be happening, and that's where we are right now. This Kremlin, and actually at one point, Russia fell out of how shall we say, continuity with the Islamic movement when they were engaged in Afghanistan. So I don't know if they are still continuing this, because recently Putin said that he wouldn't attack Israel because there are 2 million Russians living there. So he seems to have some affinity there. But it seems like the Soviet era KGB plan simply took off on its own. And as you say, the red-green crossover, the leftists and the Islamists have found each other. And one day, the leftists will be lined up against the wall and, taken out as useful idiots that they are. Yeah. So anyway, but we do have to stand up and demand that rule of law be implemented in Canada. And the existing rules, we don't need additional rules. We have all the rules we need right now to enact them and to stop this street chaos. If we don't, it'll turn into, just like George Floyd, BLM riots and everything. It just keeps getting worse. And like I showed you at the beginning, there was a mini hostage taking. Some people might not see it that way, but that's how I see it. Anyway, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah. Absolutely, Michelle. We'll have you on again. We always love you coming and educating us and our members. And I'm going to ask our members as well, please follow Michelle on Substack. I'm going to bring up a screen I'm going to share in a moment where you can connect with her and sign up to some of her platforms. I think it's really, really important that you follow her and be well educated. Share this video with your elected officials. Build a relationship. I don't care if you want to say they're so leftist and NDP. Hold their feet to the fire. You got to say, you know what, and bring in, the sections of the criminal code to say, you're walking a very fine line here. This is treason. You are destroying our democracy. You are facilitating a foreign body that's unelected in destroying us. And this needs to stop from the Global Compact on Migration and 17 Sustainable Development Goals to remove our borders and flood us with people that don't align with our values, to what is going on in using the natives, the Indians, as pawns. I want to see them thrive. And in order to do that, we need to stop the money train. We need to all be treated equally according to the Constitution and the law. And then, you know what, let's look at it in 10 or 20 years. And I think that everybody's going to be very happy with the decision. But it's going to come to getting good people elected into office and participating in the election process and overseeing that as well. So thank you, Michelle, so much. God bless you for the work that you're doing. And we'll see you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, I'm just going to share my screen because I want all you good people to know how to navigate Action for Canada's site. One of our best links is under call to action. Go to weekly emails. That will quickly bring you to, the guests that we've had on. If you remember like 3 weeks ago that we had a guest on and you want it, that's a quick way of finding that out, or go to the actual page. So if we're talking on 15-minute cities, click on there. Scroll to the bottom of the page and you'll see all of the guests and Empower Hours and a lot of other great information, notices of liability, and ways that you can take action within your communities. Now, on this particular issue, under current issues, I am recommending that you would, just got to get that to the side, that you would click on UNDRIP. And then it will bring you to this page. And then again, if you click read the in-depth report, we have been building this page for a couple of years. The Canadian Systemic Racism Ruse, Truth and Revelation. And then if you scroll down, you will just see the subjects that pick any one of these and start sending them to your elected officials and ask them to answer for it. Okay, showing the hundreds of billions of dollars. I need to update this because more hundreds of billions of dollars has gone to the Indians, just, taking it from Canadians, robbing us blind. And it's the majority of the chiefs. The Indians themselves aren't seeing this money. And I'm talking to people that are in the bands and they're saying, Tanya, we actually want these treaties ripped up. We've become wards of the state. We're not benefiting from this. It's doing us harms. The chiefs are corrupt. And now the Indians themselves are accumulating information and putting it together and calling for investigations of their chiefs. So we're really shifting a corner here. And I've always said, you know what, I've got attacked by chiefs and they wanted to shut me down. And when I looked into it, they were the ones signing the treaties. And that would be Chief Kenny Watts down here at the bottom. He looks so, I don't know, he looks a little silly here. But yeah, when I looked into it, him attacking me, that was the reason. This, again, is where you would come and find the excellent work that Michelle has done previously in trying to do this 911 call to say this is one of the areas in Canada that needs a lot of our attention, and just choose any link, build the relationship with your elected officials, and start sending them this information. All right. So next week, we are going to have our good friend Audrey Werner coming on the show. I'm so excited about having her on. And the reason is, you all know I've been announcing that I'm going to Washington, D.C. I leave a week from Sunday. This is going to be my first trip there, but we're going to be meeting with the International Coalition for Children, which we are a founding member of, and our wonderful allies from Australia, New Zealand, Wales, the UK, and America. And Audrey is in Texas, as well as Rhonda is in Indiana. And what we're going to be doing when we meet with the team is Audrey and Rhonda are going to file a bill that they filed in 2017 calling for an investigation of the pedophile Alfred Kinsey for child abuse. He is the one that is behind the comprehensive sexuality education. He is the one that was made like an honorary member of the United Nations and said, hey, look at your great research on, sexualizing children from birth, on the research saying children are sexual at birth. And so we better train them up on this through sex education in the schools. And Hugh Hefner got involved, and Margaret Sanger from Planned Parenthood, and it has been a downward spiral for our children. So if we can actually get Alfred Kinsey investigated and then him discredited and his research that he was abusive towards children, he's already dead and gone, but it is important that this investigation take place. So like I say, his research will be discredited and removed from the education system. We want to see kids educated on biology. That is all any teacher should be talking to our children about. The rest needs to be up to the parents, and we need to get this garbage out of the schools. So be sure to join us next week. I'm really excited about that show. And then the following week, we're going to be live in Washington, D.C. with some of these great ladies and the work that they're doing. So please, again, financially support us. We need money to make this trip happen, hotels, flights. It is critical that Action for Canada be there. We're going to be meeting with some very important individuals in government as well, who are going to assist us in moving these actions forward. So I thank you for that. And next, I want to cover our scripture for tonight. I've got 3 different verses that are very applicable to what's happening in our land. I've said repeatedly from Exodus 23:32 to 33, the Bible says, you shall make no covenant with them and their gods. They shall not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. So the Bible said, when you go into a country, into a nation, don't sign treaties with them, because it will definitely become a hook and a snare for you. The next one, so I believe God is undoing this. I believe he's bringing us to this point so that the Indians themselves will be free and the Canadians will be free as well from this obligation that we've been put under, this chokehold on our finances, on our land, and it's just escalating, right? We need to bring it to a stop. And then from Proverbs 14, verse 15, the simple believe anything, but the prudent give thought to their steps. And hasn't Michelle Stirling just been so prudent? And Action for Canada, we're being prudent as well to say, hey, we're not just going to buy into what the government is telling us. I'm not a white colonialist. I'm not a white supremacist. I haven't harmed anybody. So hold on a second. I oppose what you're saying because I don't align with lies, and none of us should. If you feel that there's lies being told, then you need to expose them, and you need to come out very courageously and speak out about it, because the truth shall set us free. And the final verse is from Psalms 33:10 to 12. The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He makes the plans of the peoples of no effect. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nations whose God is the Lord, the people he has chosen as his own inheritance. And so that's what we want to get back to here. And isn't that what about everything with Charlie Kirk has been about? Is that he was proclaiming the name of the Lord Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior of the nation of America. And that we as a people, you know what, we've tried secularism. It's not going so well in the Islamic countries. There's no freedom in the 56 Islamic majority countries. People live in oppression. They're persecuting and murdering any non-believers, and that doesn't happen in Christian nations. We're seeing it's not working out in North Korea, China, Pakistan. I could go on. It's not working out well in India. And people say, oh, no, India is part of the Commonwealth, and they may make other comments. No. If you look at what's going on with Christians and non-believers in India, it's not going well. It only went well. It only goes well in Christian nations. That's where true democracy flourishes. And so we need to get back to the biblical standard that Canada was founded on. And so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to say God bless you and God bless Canada.
Sacrificing so much for our freedom. actions are completely 100% unlawful. Judgment will again be found on justice, and those with virtuous hearts will pursue it. You have a virtuous heart if you are here today pursuing freedom and righteousness. And then verse 23 comes along with a promise. God says He will turn the sins of evil people back on them